Again, my name is Sbusiso Xaba. I'm the national chairperson of the PAC. We are on the platform of the NNLC Youth League. Our host, President, can I hand over to you? Comrade Mafafa, over to you. Comrade Mafafa seems to have a challenge. Can you hear us? Can you respond or hint with the sign?
I see some holes.
Yeah, it seems like he has a big challenge. We will have to proceed. As I indicated, Comrade Lamin, I don't know if you can hear. Can you hear him, or it's just my side?
I can't hear him also.
Yes, no, let's proceed. I think one first part he was going to apologize for the delay, comrades. Great apology from our side. Today we wanted to be a little bit more interactive than usual in terms of using the tools that we have learned previously. If you remember, we took some time to learn how to analyze different forces that are participating in any conflict. Where do they stand from a philosophy, from a paradigm, from a process, from a practice point of view? And some time ago, we also looked at dialectic materialism as a method of analysis to really dissect a problem. I think we had two hot sessions on that topic, which basically we said we move from facts primarily, we transform facts to insights, moving from quantitative to qualitative, and we negate the negation, which means that we basically challenge everything, even challenge what has been challenged. So we are, like I say, that we are expecting greater interaction today. Let me then ask you, what have you seen in Ukraine, and what is your thoughts before we get the perspective from this my side of the mic? Shoot, comrades. There is absolute silence.
Yes, leadership. Yes, leadership.
Sikhola more.
Yeah, Comrade Jobe, go ahead.
Okay, what's happening in Ukraine, Mole? The thing of English is not my mother tongue, so sometimes I find that I've got some difficulties. So,
yeah.
Thank you, leadership. Okay, in the Ukraine, a general view, somehow, no, to go to this deep. Chief, Kulma General, among
Kulma General, a general.
Okay, Chief. Okay, lenza base-Ukraine ngole president wakhona ngicabanga ukuthi kwaba nenkinga ukuthi akhe bangani laba ngathini ngachaza ukuthi baditha neRussia ezinokuthi iRussia maybe neNATO akusele ukuthelana kahle manje. So usuke president we-Ukraine ukuthi abe khona ke bungani abakhako nawo akazange abuka ukuthi maybe basuka ku-Russia bona sovereign country, so besuka ku-Russia maybe some of the agreements that they had before kube na it's 2014 masida kwakhishwa khona president wase-Russia wase-Ukraine lo phose be-Russian like lo hambisana ne-Russia kakhulu. So abasena ngicabanga ukuthi wakha ubuhlobo kabi ne-NATO le kakhulu le USA e-Europe. So kwaba nenkinga ke lapho base i-Ukraine seyitibeka ingcindezelo ukuthi ingahlaseleka i-Russia namanini because once uhyperisha sitha some very operation also sitha some kuze ukuthi ingatoba ke nale base lefuna kuyakha i-NATO le e-Ukraine le abasizokhetha Putin ukuthi asheshe ahlasele kungaze kube khona kwentaka kuya phambili. So nguvile lengakuva ukuthi abakhona leti ngqongqo before but alizange aba fruitful lokho abasekuletha ukuthi ukhansi wena invading lebakhona ke nake ngo-understand dawo Chief.
Yebo, ngicela omunye ede.
Yes, Africa ngathi nomunye evakala nyalo.
Yes, you are clear manje.
Yes, my leader. From what lengutfolile, my leader, what is happening Russia? If I'm not mistaken, December 2021, Russia received data ukuthi NATO plana ku deploy troops bese ibeka nema base missiles e-Ukraine. Kwase ke kuba netinkinga letentekalako ke nayiva data leyo iRussia ngoba sekuchubeka lokuthi kunalama territory labo Donbas labo beba prepare ishare khona wase ke Putin uyabona le danger le leta neNATO le leta neNATO nokuthi seyiplana lokuthi kulobhisha i-Ukraine ukuthi ingene kiyo wase ke uyaplana Putin ngoba uyabona ukuthi it will threaten because i-relationship yabo more especially nele West ayisiyo le kahle lengutholile ke nami nangithi ngiyazama kubuka ukusho ukuthi ya iRussia loku bese yona seya attack early attackeli kona maybe kusiza i-economy yase Ukraine maybe nekuthatha ama resources ase Ukraine it's just nje ngasho ukuthi it's just a political war lapho iRussia avoid na idea leta na NATO against ama human beings nekuthi kanjalo ngicabanga ukuthi lokunye lengutholile ukuthi iRussia inhloso yayo maybe is to protect the citizens nale history because kunale history lele khona lele siyatiko because iRussia is planning to protect the history yalama city lamabili nalabantu abahlala kulama city lamabili lunga start neDon State that is lunga start neDon State lama city lamabili njengoba icomrade yasho lana ukuthi since 2014 labantu have been refused to live under the control of the group lenazanile from the 2015 then shothi iRussia iyazama lokho protecta labantu labo hayi ukuthi mhlambe izama kuthatha ama resources nako lengutholile on behalf of Ukraine what I've been seeing ukuthi Ukraine is declining ukuthi yona have joined NATO or have interest in joining NATO but it seems kube nalama challenges lawo cha ukuthi ngiloko information lenginayo nami mayili.
No, thank you very much, comrades. But I must say, good lama comrade achemile. bayikhuluma kahle i-position ye-Russia abayikhulume e-Ukraine. Kusho ukuthi i-propaganda yase-CNN nokuvalwa kwe-Russian TV akusizanga ukuthi i-perspective ye-Russia ifike kithi sonke. But asithathe isikhathi nje sokubheka kwi-history. Ngokwe-identity, both countries are Slavic countries. Ama-languages wabo or imvelaphi yabo ama-Slavic, both people. So when the Soviet Union was formed, it tried to make sure that people of those linguistic association, they come together to form one country that becomes a super state, Izwe, Eli strong, Eli one. You'll remember that the Soviet Union had chosen another line that was different to the line that was chosen by the European countries as a European country, because Russia is both in Europe and Asia geographically. So it has a lot of European influence, and it touched Europe as well. Historically, you will see Uguti pre the emperors, the Tsar's time, or the emperor of Russia before the Soviet Union. You had Slavic, and apparently the headquarters of the Slavic state used to be Kiev, which is the headquarters of Russia now. So the countries have centuries of backward and forward in terms of who is in charge. So it's people whose history is tied to each other. Secondly, you will see that from a language point of view, Russian is spoken on both sides. There is a lot of intermarriage between Russian speakers and Russian citizens and Ukraine citizens, and Russian speakers in Ukraine and the rest of the Ukrainians. So their conflicts have been conflicts of minor contestations rather than the major contestation that they are in now. In the time of the Soviet Union, when the Soviet Union was getting stronger, it started eating away these countries. And when in the 80s, when the Soviet Union then split into different states, after Gorbachev, let me say, in transition between Gorbachev and this new state that used to make the federation that used to be called the Soviet Union. In that time, of course, Ukraine had found its independence, moved away. Apparently, these states that were not the Russian Federation in the Soviet Union seem to have been aggrieved, because the first opportunity that they got, they migrated towards not only from communism to capitalism, but they also migrated towards affinity to America and American things. Of course, if you remember, the life in the Soviet Union was more uniform. Luxuries was very limited. Necessity were guaranteed, but luxury were not easily available. And some people really wanted their luxuries, particularly those who had an opportunity to be higher classes than the others. They utilized that quite strongly. So that the bitterness come from the split of the Soviet Union. Between now and the times Russia as a federation has attacked at least 2 other countries that split out of their post-Soviet, which is Georgia and Chechnya. I do not know if you remember those wars, comrades, but there were those wars as well that have gone on to Nangzana to create a situation occur. So when countries like Ukraine, Poland, which was outside, but but it was part of the Russian sphere of influence, migrated towards the other direction, that was actually in violation of an agreement of commitments, verbal commitments that were given by the USA in particular, that when the Berlin Wall falls, it will not, NATO will not move beyond Germany eastwards, so that Russia and the former Warsaw Pact countries, which were the countries that were basically communist, about Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, abo Finland, abo Estonia, and all of those were steadfast were expected to be steadfast in providing security to Russia, but it did not turn out that way. So the question becomes then, what is the interest from that history? Both countries have security concerns. Ukraine was always afraid of what has happened, that Russia will at some stage feel the need to attack them. Hence, you see them wanting to join NATO, wanting to join European Union, want to move to that direction. Also, before I get there, Russia as well has security concerns. It could not allow the former enemies, or which are the current enemies now, which is the old capitalist Europe and North America, to get close to them militarily. You'll remember that America, after the Second World War, did not remove its major military bases in Germany. And when the deal was being made at the end of the Second World War, they actually tried to exclude Russia. Hence, you see Russia then taking East Germany by force. So it's in that context of high mistrust that you see today's event as they appear. So we said that Ukrainians want to be close to America, wants to move in that direction, wants the development that is associated with Western Europe and the life that comes with it. Because it has a lot of minerals and has a lot of rich soil, it's a major agricultural output. Ukraine, basically, between itself and Russia, they feed the world in terms of grain. That create Europe to be quite a lucrative market. If you remember that they used to produce that food and hardly getting the benefit that they deserve. So they always had harboring anti-Russian sensitivity, which US saw and took advantage of. In terms of Russia, security fears, Russia has always been harboring ambitions of being a well player. It could not stomach that it was no longer even second fiddle to America. It was shifting a little bit lower in the scale of countries' economy, except that it still remained number 2 in terms of the military strength in the world. When you measure the armies, America being number 1, with NATO, it becomes quite heavier for Russia to engage in. Ukraine was so bitter that it actually later banned the Russian language. After a little bit of scuffles where throughout that former Communist Party, US was sponsoring what was called the Yellow Revolution. I do not know if you remember. Removing all the communist parties, all the socialist parties in favor of the liberal parties, or even right-wing parties. They did not mind as long as it's not communist parties, as long as not parties that will restrict their extraction of minerals from that region. So after that, they then removed the president of Ukraine that was pro-Russia in 2014 because they had a lot of mass protests that were going, that were coordinated by America. America even appointed the cabinet that was going to come in when they removed that president who ran away to Russia. That's where Russia took the Crimea, the peninsula of Crimea, because Russia that used to be part of Russia. And at some stage, Russia gave it to one of its provinces then, or let me say Soviet Union, it gave it to one of its provinces, which was Ukraine. Remember that most of Russia has the biggest sea coast in the world. However, most of their coasts have ice, which means that very little sea that is their own territory has fresh waters that are flowing, which meant that if Russia did not take Crimea, Russia was not going to have a navy because it was not going to have a sea where their ships, military ships and cargo ships, which major trade moves on, was going to be with. So that was going to throttle Russia. So you are correct when you are saying that this is a political war. This is an economic war, because the aim here is the question of who controls the land, therefore who can control whose survivor. Let me stop there for historical purposes and open for any addition or any subtraction. So with that quietness, let me move that. Then in this, come in.
Yes, Africa. Kuke kwaba ne-meet, my leader. Thank you for the presentation. Kuke kwaba ne-meet let's manje ke laba conductor kahle lama from the 2014 lokwaba nale mass movement ukuthi banakuzana bathi laba conductor le military kuthiwa ngilo 2 cities le Domestic nale cities bathi kulama citizens akhona athi alwela inkululeko bathi not per se ukuthi singathi ze formal bathi kwanabo ngibo laba conductor lenazana. How true is that, my leader?
Russia would like to make us believe that they did not take Crimea, and they did not have interest of taking the rest of the eastern Ukraine. In my view, that is not fully true. They committed military, as I said, that they had military interest because they always loan that land to have bases, military bases, navy bases for their military ships. So yiko ubona they a little bit aggressively taking that, of course, because they want to conform to the they want to conform to, what can I call it, to international law. So they made some kind of gimmick which looks like a referendum and all that. Of course, people who live in that regions are Russian. And of course, because the Ukrainians from the West hate Russia so much that they even hate Russians living in Ukraine and hate the Russian language. Because after 2014, they cut off the Russian language. West, there's a river that runs from the north down. They block the water, so there's been no water in Donetsk and Luhansk areas. Water has been very scarce because they just blocked the river on top. They built a dam and showed who's the boss. Hence, you see the aggression between those separatist states from who have declared themselves as republics now. I think then the question becomes, then so what? I think it's important to indicate that right or wrong in this case does not matter. What matters is its interest. The Russian interest, as we said, that the major interest is security and the major interest is economy. Remember, one of the pipelines, one of the fights they had earlier was that there was a pipeline that goes to Europe through Ukraine, that Russia was accusing Ukraine of stealing gas and oil out of those pipes as they pass it through. And Russia was paying, commission for that oil. Subsequently, which was a masterstroke, they sold that to Europe. Now Europe, that's why you see that oil not being bombed. It continued to move because the first thing that Ukraine would have done was to block the oil, ban the oil so that there is no income to Russia and possibly cripple their machinery from a financial point of view. Russia would like to have its gas moving freely from those regions. It likes to have its security assured. Ukraine would like to have its security assured, and it would like to have a right to choose its friends without control from Russia. Then you have this new separatist state that needs protection from Russia, and they cannot survive on themselves without Russia. So Russia has two options, either to absorb them and extend its own border, or choose the path that they've chosen to leave them as independent state. My question then, who's gonna win? Really, it depends what you mean win, because win can only means that you attain your goals. So Ukraine's goal is to maintain the integrity of their territory, which is fair. Every country would like to do that. have sovereignty, which means that it has a right to make a decision. I don't see them winning that. I don't know, what do you think on your side? In terms of Russia, if winning is to subdue and control Ukraine all, they will not win, because history tells us that major states versus small states always sustain and until the bigger state cannot stomach the body bags coming home from the bigger state and they pull back. You can see from Afghanistan, Russia, America, you can see from Vietnam, America, China, they all left with their nose bleeding. Not that they did not have the money and the military, but a smaller country fighting a bigger country gets more unity among their people. Their morale gets higher than the bigger country, and they get sympathy from the world compared to the bigger country. If Russia's win is to force NATO to move backwards, it's likely to get that. But unfortunately, on the other side, they have strengthened NATO to be solid among its ambition, and to fear and strengthen its armies like it wouldn't have done before. So it basically has sharpened the sword. In terms of lose-lose, Russia is willing to use nuclear weapons if it finds that its existence is challenged, and it's willing to annihilate both America and Europe. And some of us might just get a machapazil. And knowing our leaders, you might find that others are already wanting to commit militarily on one side or another. And yeah, before I get deeper on that, because we then have to look at what impact is for us. I would like to hear your comments at this stage in terms of understanding the movement of interest. As I said, namhlanje, I expected you to talk more than me.
Yes, Bafre. Angathi noma ngiyavakala ema-Afrika kuhle kuba nenkinga network ye.
Uyezwakala.
Yes, ma-Afrika ukhatheka nawe ema-Afrika lana some point. Ngiyavakala my leader on ukuthi i-win isho ukuthi you achieve wathi le goal yakho loboyifisile ukuthi nawucala. But looking kulama issues lamabili bengicela unganale because ngathi iRussia will meet ema challenges and Ukraine will meet ema challenges. Kahle lokho political kusho ukuthini nangabe nami igoli ukuthi kulukhulu ngiyithole nalona kulukhulu ukuthi ngiyithole ingabe nangakanalize ukuthi lokho kusho ukuthini politically lokho. Then bese ngiraise umbuto lomunye ngoba inkinga lema media maningi lasa asireveal lele information. Manje ayibona ke media isebendelela most medias are captured. Baveta information le supporter bona. That's what I discovered ngema media nje all over the world. Kune question lana lengiyavela yathi the army yase Ukraine it is bekune assumption ukuthi i-weak and is defenseless. Like angekhona ku-survivor against Russia njengoba ushito wathi i-Russia i-testa inale nkinga yayo ye-army ukuthi testa army yayo. But kunana ngibuto nang let's see back in the times of the Soviet during the 1990s, if not mistaken, kuthiwa nayiyo le Soviet army bathi yahlukana kabili, kwaba khona labaya e-Ukraine kwaba khona labaya e-Russia. Is that true historically nje lokho my leader? Yeah, I'm not sure of the time, but it's the 90s. Yeah, it's the 90s. Kwaba true lokuthi lama army asihlukana ikhazi labaya baya e-Ukraine labanye baya bedangana ku-Russia. Angiloko my leader.
Kumbula kwakune country Soviet Union. So that country yaphihliga basically. So my phihliga this country, you then find all the soldiers, officers, base Soviet Union, they came throughout AMA provinces or AMA states, a Soviet Union, which Ukraine was one of them. So you are correct that some of the heads of military ended up in Ukraine, were senior officers of the Soviet army, which is the biggest contributor was, because of the size of the population, was Russia, which is Russian Federation now. But it is not necessarily a split. It was the whole political split, civil servant split, military split between the two. It was naive to say Uguti in Ukraine will be a weak army. Ukraine has 250,000 active soldiers and about 1 million in lama standby. What can we call it? This army full time. Part-timers, a army who get called from time to time. So it's not a small army. And Russia has about 1 million active soldiers and about 3 million altogether with militias and those reserves, that's what they call them. So you got two armies, and if you see the Russia only sent about 120,000 soldiers to this war. So it's 100,000 soldiers fighting 250,000 soldiers from Ukraine. But because Tina Sitola a lot of information from an American perspective or from an English perspective, they don't tell. You only see on the pictures the amount of devastation that has happened to Ukraine, which means that Russia started with their bases and their Air Force, because you hardly see their planes. They had an Air Force, and that Air Force for the past 10 years has been trained by America. But you don't see any Ukrainian plane, because Russia is Shayama plane bases. By the time in Ghana, already they could not have an Air Force, which in today's warfare, you need a lot of aerial control. The Soviet Union has a lot of new weapons that it has not used in this war. Apparently, it fears that it might lose advantage because, you see, this war is so delicate that it can easily spill to be a full European war. And Russia would not want to overcommit now, because remember, this fight is not necessarily between Ukraine and Russia. It's between Russia and NATO. It's just that Ukraine became a proxy. So njoba kuhlala kushiwo ukuthi shayinja uzophuma umnikazi wayo. So uma kushaywa Ukraine, you might find that Europe comes to the battle. So Russia does not want to overcommit really. That's why you'll see slow movement. Secondly, in warfare like this, there's a lot of landmines that are put on the ground. Hence, you see very slow movement of the Russian army, because before they move, they must demine the areas that have been mined by the Ukrainians, who had time to create those defenses. But no one is going to win this war, in my prediction. No one will get what they want, but Ukraine is likely to lose more than Russia. And Europe might lose even more economically. The expenses they are carrying in looking after these, what do you call these things, refugees, it's enormous. And trauma, so you'll find a lot of crazy people, new matters, new society, new problems that Europe never knew that existed, that caused and changed them as a society. So already Europe feels the burden of being at war, even if they are not getting bombed like the Ukrainians. Oh, sorry, I don't know where did I stop. I was saying that the question is, so what as African people? Because the question that lies with us is that, what is our interest? What is our threat? What is our opportunities here? For the first time since the Second World War, Europe is preoccupied with its own problem. It does not have time to create us problem. It's an excellent time to move ourselves forward. You see, most countries were able to liberate themselves immediately after the Second World War. Most were able to liberate themselves immediately after the Second World War. Partly because when Africans, you see, Africans have this habit, there's some white man who likes them. So they get surprised. They got surprised when they were going to fight for UK, going to fight for France, to see how badly France treated them. Those were the first one to start being conscious that as Africans, we need to consolidate our own nation. Even in this time, you saw most Ukrainians were really in trouble. They were bombed, they were running away, but they still have enough time to be racist against African people. It tells you that the world does not take us seriously. And it gives us an opportunity to focus on liberating ourselves completely. We have to get major gains from this period to breathe that we are being given while Europeans are on each other's throats. What can we do now that will assist us to be liberated fully while they are busy there? Because Europe now is all preoccupied with the so-called Ukrainian crisis. May I have your views before? Yeah, I hope that we are digesting, but as African people, we're going to be impacted. Oil prices are gonna be unstable. Manufactured goods are gonna go up. We always say that we have agricultural sector in Southern Africa. That's where we get exposed that the so-called farmers are just importers of food from other countries, because the price of food is gonna shoot off the roof. So we're gonna suffer from this element, regardless if the hot war finishes now in Russia, Ukraine, or it continues, but we are going to have to feel it. So it's in our interest that we produce our own food, we strengthen our industries technologically and otherwise, and produce nearer to home. And more, what we have not done before, to create our own machinery, because they normally catch us at the level of technology that we become technologically unsavvy. Also, it means that as Africans, it's time to strengthen our militaries and strengthen our political consciousness and our political campaign to get the kinds of governments that we want and desire. On that note, I will stop here and give an opportunity for anyone to say something before Comrade Mafafa then say the last words in closing. No one wants to take the floor. Comrade Mafafa, over to you.
Asibonge comrade national chairperson Sibonge for such a good political analysis between the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Yeah, but when you go deeper, you can see that it's not only about that. Even the Europe, since ngalenza by NATO, young Sibonge my comrades nothing that happens in the world that deserves to be ignored, and nothing that happens in the world by mistake. Every situation but as even in Africa, we are automatically affected. I can example, for example, in and now my prices sekudla in the country as a very but if you produce Swaziland, for example, we produce sugar there, but lo sugar lo brown esistakhela yena lapha esimunye emhlume big band udule kwendlula nang udule bamba ufanana nangishukela nangilomhlobo ufanana nangishukela nangilomhlobo lesizasangala. But it's a question for us as Maswati, because even the regime is using the tactics to make the people suffer, because kunalesisho lesithi bantu uma sebakhona kutimela wealthy abakhoni bese abakhoni ukulalela. That is why even the government was able to come to a situation lapho bathi sisebenzi silungele ukuthi singahola 1.1 1100. Then uyatibuka ukuthi iparliament ingashaya njani umthiselo njalo le situation labantu batawudlangana. That's another situation lesibhekene nayo. Automatically uma gcina teka mina as a Swazi, you as a South African utawuthinzeka. Comrade Chair, kune situation we analyzing with another comrade le ndeke South Africa. Then the comrade was say, I must ignore it. I said, is this Operation Tutula? Operation Tutula. What happened? There was this view. Yes, it is good to fight drugs. Yes, it is good. But the challenge we're meeting with these illegal immigrants, for example, we have so many our brothers and sisters lababalekile lakangwane babalekela i-regime because i-regime bafuna kamatimi ifuna kubabulala. Then these people, even by mistake, ngeke vele baphume egedeni with ama-passport with whatever. Labantu baphuma ngabo 1 ekseni, labanye baphuma ngabo 3 ekseni, babalekela impilo ukuthi bamane bakhona ukuthi basurvive from the regime. Then you come on the other side, you are saying all those labete the illegal immigrants bonke labete na it's a question vele nabafika ngale automatically, but awufuna umsebenzi kokuthi ngimane ngizame nami kuphila lapho ngiphila khona uthole emaswati lamanye wathola shayile ema-truck. But it's a question, national chairperson, Africans, not only Swazis, Africans are being banned. Sibona bayashiswa, more especially emaswati ayashiswa lapha ema-truckini. This conflict, but all in all, this conflict besisho ukuthi what happened ngale it automatically affect us ukuthi sengidawubalekela kuphi na i-regime siyafika sengidawubalekela kuphi because safika ngale sengilimigarden ngifuna impepha then say I can't produce the milk for certain a reason letingiphushile ukuthi ngibe nalo. Nale issue yama-trucks yekushiswa kwema-Africans amongst the African states, we can call it lokwentekalako, it's a time that kumele kurise against bona because bayafa abantu labamnyama for in such events. But all in all, the United States of Africa is the solution to what is happening. Amandla comrades, ngifisele nemacabane busuku lobuhle nawo national chairperson. Ayisiyabonga comrades.
Thank you very much. Take away, comrades. I think the last part that you indicated is a topic on its own because there are root causes that we must deal with that are not of our own making. Even the funding that goes into those kind of campaigns need to be analyzed and tracked. For the European crisis, Europe is in crisis. We got our own crisis, but we have to learn from their crisis, and we have to take full advantage to liberate ourselves politically and economically. We have to explore new ways of contesting and controlling the economic side of our world. Thank you very much, comrades. Have a good evening.